we get no credit, that is boons, a better life, and that is to heavily postulate on what we, through interpretation, infers. Because I'm going to tell you, as I put this all together, and the clues and the outright information become more weighty, more lofty, more prevalent, more prevailing, it's part and parcel to and in your face, like every horror movie that you see. And it starts to look a lot more number one. And the sad part of number one is the fact that a lot of people have been hurt through the process. And what I'm going to say is L. Ron Hubbard invited the entities all too quickly. And many of these figures that do invite the entities in, the muses, the jinn, the assisters, things that are hopping around in Tom Cruise, the thing that's hopping around in Tom Cruise that you celebrate and that is celebrated in society as celebrity. Celeb. It is a collaboration. We're going about our morning duties. As best we can. As a humble servant. And that's exactly what we are. Why do you think making that movie Avatar was so pivotal, so important? Well, folks, the bottom line is, it's because we are avatars. And that's my morning ritual. So why do you think the goal is so heavily leaned on wars, oppression, and suppression? It's to battle the uprising of the battered, war-torn, true selves that only a portion of us actually have occupation of. But I don't believe the whole story through Dianetics that almost portrays these entities like Superman, as if their home galaxy, their home of origin was out there in space and was destroyed, and they sort of, like angels, they came to us as if they were rays of light or the colors from space. There is a strange interaction with the sun. There's a strange fascination with human sexuality. And more so, and the thing that prompted me right when I was getting up today was there is an interesting thing happening there when it comes to the aggressiveness of the average human, and how they are taken over by a force, right, in their youth, in the hubris of their youth. And and then when they get older, Uncle Buck isn't who he used to be. He's limping, he's hobbling. The war hero isn't who he used to be. He says, I did those things. She says, I was that beautiful, I was that person. But in actuality, when you sit down with these people, only some few years later, when they're no longer bathed in the concoction of their own hormone paramnesia, and it's not their own, the divine inspiration, the Garden of Eden, eating of the fruit, the serpent, all of these things culminate into the entry of a foreign force into what we would assume as the human form, but were they made to be avatars in the first place, as if a snugly fitting like a glove. And I think what may have happened is that boredom ensued when you're talking about beings that posture and postulate awesome power as to be able to take refuge, take up a home within an entity as if it were a suit. You're now talking about, constants in the universe that we know are truths, and who's speaking right now. It's like, I don't have this motivation where I'm in the zone, right, where I'm delivering the perfect message at the perfect time, that I'm so on cue that my timing seems divine. No, quite the contrary. It seems like I'm alone and isolated, and the buzz and the loudspeaker isn't only something that I'm trying to keep down to a dull roar and deliver the message, but also it's not interested in me because the subject matter that I talk about is boring and banal. No one's going to believe me. And I think what may have happened was that these things became ultimately evil. Whether or not they began that way, or the entire project or process began that way, I have no idea. I think also probably the host body has to also have a persona or personality that best matches specific God, what do we call them? We don't even have a name for them. I remember a couple years ago, Nathaniel Gillis was referring to these types of entities as molters, because it almost resembled what he was talking about. It's like a crucible, right? Like the human body is a crucible, and the entity, the symbiote, it's not just a symbiote. It's almost like someone who's operating a heavy crane. You're going to merely call them an operator or a driver, when the crane itself was built around the operator, to a certain specification of the digits on the hand and the ergonomics that are surrounding. I know most crane operators wouldn't agree with me as far as the comfort level on that, right? So I digress, but what I am getting at is the fact that you have something that fits so well that it seemed to be made for a specific purpose and application. And it's almost as if at times, in pocketed regions of the phenomenon, you have little quests, little games, little things that are happening there. Perhaps they got stuck. Maybe they were on vacation. Maybe it was something where, you know, this is sort of a trivial, frivolous type of activity that was done by way of a very extremely advanced civilization. I don't even think civilization is the right word for it. Matriculation and meandering of entities. And, you know, it seems like my saying this bores people. It's even boring to talk about, yet it's the subject matter of every movie. It's at the main premise of every religion. It's talked about more than any other story. Maybe that's why it's so boring. Maybe when we start finally identifying it, the thing that we find boring is the fact that we feel like we'll never know what we are, who we are, or if we are anything, right? Without the host, right? That we are just an avatar, so to speak, body, and that we are waiting for the muse to excite us, to invigorate us, to take us to new heights. And perhaps the machine started to learn a little bit too much. Perhaps the break off and all the so-called junk genetics is a break off, where the avatars, suits themselves, began to imprint and take on several attributes from different, as they've been called, rays of light, you know. So I mean, you could go through different cultures, identify a myriad of different names and subsets, but I think when we look at the Vedas, when we look at Hinduism, when we look at Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard, when we see the strange happenings that were going on with Aleister Crowley and Jack John Parsons and JPL, and the, you know, how this ties directly in with Gardner and the whole Wiccan witch thing. I mean, that's a riveting story unto itself, you know. And what are you conjuring? Like Nathaniel Gillis makes such a great point in his most recent interviews, and he's becoming bored with it himself, because, like, where do you go with this? Like, is winning losing? That's the big question. Like, we're already losing our culture. We're losing Christmas. We're losing Thanksgiving. These types of things aren't even going to be celebrated soon. We're going to know definitively exactly what they are, and it's not going to have a good story to it, you know. And we are gaslit under Stockholm Syndrome, and that might be our base persona, our base personality. We may be so minute and so fractionated that we couldn't even rise up to what we would consider common animals around us that seem to be in peace and harmony, living within their own sort of sociopathic meme of production, where form follows function, function into form. They are what they were created to be, and that doesn't seem concurrent with quote unquote humanity as avatars.